by praising Allah, our Lord, our Creator, our Sustainer. We testify to His oneness and His greatness. We exist only because of Him. Our families, our fortune, our wealth, our health, everything that we have is because Allah has given us the opportunity to be in this world, to be in these blessed nights. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us and accept from us in these blessed nights. And we send praise upon our greatest teacher and role model, the man who we all hope to meet on the Day of Judgment and drink from his hands and be the first to be greeted into paradise by him directly, our dear beloved Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib. We ask Allah to bless Prophet Muhammad, to bless his family, to bless his community, and to bless all those who strive and struggle and work in his guidance until the end of time. On these last beautiful nights of Ramadan, the 25th night, may it be Laylat al-Qadr, may it be the night of power. It's really important to remember how these nights are critical in the legacy that you leave behind. Everybody that's ever walked on the face of the earth has an opportunity to leave a legacy, has an opportunity to leave an impact on the world. And imagine a world, though, where you grew up, you were born into unimaginable oppression, unimaginable pain, unimaginable hardship, and all of the odds were stacked against you. You know, if you think about humans throughout history, there are many, many grave sins that humans do. But amongst the greatest sin is a sin that Allah made haram on Himself. And there's really, I don't know of any sin that Allah explicitly says, I've made haram on myself. He's the creator of everything we know. The galaxies, the universes, the worlds, everything. And there is one thing that even Allah would not do and made haram upon Himself. And it is one of the greatest blemishes in human existence, which is oppression. The idea of oppressing another human being. It's the greatest blemish. It's one of the greatest sins that can ever take place. And on the Day of Judgment, Allah punishes those that oppress with many different feats of punishment. There's so many feats of punishment for those that oppress other human beings. But amongst them is that they will be resurrected on the Day of Judgment in utter and pure darkness. Pure darkness, no light at all that they can see. They'll be resurrected on the day of fear in utter pitch black darkness with a fear that is compounded with fear. Why? Because imagine how many children were snatched out of their homes because of oppression. Imagine how many women were torn from their families because of oppression. Imagine how many men were beaten and bruised and killed because of the greatest oppression humans inflicted upon one another. And that oppression, one of them, is the oppression of slavery. Slavery has been around since humans have been on earth. Thousands of years and millions of people. Millions of souls have lived through slavery. Imagine living a life where you cannot travel whenever you wanted. You cannot move freely. You cannot eat whenever you wanted. You only ate when somebody told you. You only drank when somebody told you. You didn't speak unless somebody told you. You were born into this endless system of bondage that would hold onto you forever. Slaves, their bodies were broken at the service of their master in the millions. They built civilizations, including this very land that you sit on, this very country that we live in, and their names are erased from history books. They do not exist anywhere. They lived in humiliation. They died in oppression, and the world doesn't remember them at all. How many unmarked graves? How many thrown into the oceans? How many thrown into ditches and lakes and rivers? How many you will never know that they ever existed? Moms, and daughters, fathers and sons, either hung from trees or thrown off cliffs. We will not know the name of any of them. But Allah Azza wa Jal knows every single second of their oppression. And Allah will resurrect their oppressors in the worst scenario possible. Because al-dhulm dhulumat yawm al-qiyamah. Oppression will be utter darkness on the Day of Judgment. But there is one man who is the greatest slave in human history. He is the greatest name that human history has ever known as a redemption story, as a triumph out of slavery. He's not just a person that the world would know. He's a person that our ummah must emulate as a star of one of the stars of the great companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He was a man that the Prophet ﷺ said, I was dreaming about Jannah. Imagine the oppressed are resurrected in darkness. And this slave, whose name is known around the world and throughout history like no other slave, the Prophet ﷺ said, I heard him, his footsteps, in paradise when I envisioned and saw paradise in a dream. His name, of course, is Bilal ibn Rabah. May Allah be pleased with him. Bilal is one of the great role models that we should know, love, emulate, and wish to be with on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet ﷺ, I'll just give his ending. Why is he the most famous? He is the man, and by the way, Abdurrahman, I want to make sure that we turn the heat down or off, because everybody will knock out. If we could turn the AC on, that'll help me make sure everybody's awake for the Bilal story. Jazakallah khair. I feel you. I'm hotter than you, trust me. On the Day of Judgment, the Prophet ﷺ said that the people, there is, of course, as we'll talk about, he's most known for the greatest call any believer has ever said. Bilal radiallahu anhu was the first mu'adhin. He was the first human to call out the name of Allah, the adhan, the name of Allah in such praise, and in a beautiful call that today is echoed around the globe for over 1,400 years by millions of people. That call, and everybody that makes that call, as the Prophet ﷺ said, everybody that is a mu'adhin on the Day of Judgment, their honor will be that their necks will be as tall as giraffes, if not taller. They will stand out amongst the entire crowd and sea of humans. And it is narrated that Bilal will be the carrier of the flag. He will be the banner holder for every single person that ever made adhan that is permitted to go to Jannah. He is the man that will walk in the mu'adhineen into paradise. His triumph is not, he's not just a slave that the books of history know. He is the slave that began the leader of all of the great mu'adhineen that will enter into paradise. Like such an honor. And I think his story is filled with lessons. It's a greatest story of redemption in human history. It's one of the greatest stories of triumph in human history. And inshallah, my job today is for us to understand the story, and more importantly, try to understand the lessons that we should implement that should transform our lives. The story of Bilal radiallahu anhu begins, if you can imagine, has anybody ever, if you ever, maybe I'll think of have you ever been hurt by somebody? Of course. Think of times that you were tremendously hurt by somebody, not just hurt and somebody kind of like called you out or pushed you down or belittled you, but imagine that somebody always devalued your worth. Like, you're not worth something. And if you live in the systematic way as a Why is slavery so debasing to humans and one of the greatest blemishes? Because Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Allah created humanity to be living in dignity. And the idea of living in being so debased as a human, all of us go through a level of that, but I want you to imagine the worst level of it. I think Bilal reminds us how we can overcome the greatest struggles personally. And I think Bilal also is a metaphor for what our ummah is going through today. Because actually, maybe we are not individually debased, we don't think of it. But every single day, whether you know it or not, we as believers, we as Muslims, in this country, at this time, our humanity is being debased. From the halls of leaders in Congress today that call for all of us to be rounded up and thrown out. From the halls of power today, from Palantir to the halls of DC, calling for our extermination of our brothers and sisters around the world today. Their purpose and intent and mission is to eradicate our existence. Forget about being debased. Imagine trying to be eliminated from the face of the earth. Would we understand this framework that we would grow up in? How do you overcome that? Bilal is the greatest story of how to overcome. Bilal was born to a mom. His mother was a princess of Ethiopia. She was of royal blood. Brought to Arabia during the story of Al-Fil, when Abraha came to destroy the Kaaba. He was a tyrant who brought slaves with him to Arabia during that incident. And Bilal's mom, who was of royal blood in Habasha, in Abyssinia, she was brought into slavery in Arabia at that time. Bilal was born 10 years after Abraha. The Prophet ﷺ, of course, was born in the year of Al-Fil. Bilal was born 10 years after that in captivity. Growing up a slave, there's a mindset that is imposed upon you so that you don't think that you are human. Similar to different parts of the ummah today. Palestinians don't grow up thinking that they are human. People in our ummah today don't grow up thinking they are human. The calls of those in power today don't want us to be human. And so Bilal grows up in a place of subjugation, and he starts to slowly understand that there's a greater future for him. His mindset shifts. When does it shift? Even though he grew up decades as a slave. It shifts as one of the very first people to accept the message, as we know, of La ilaha illallah. When the Prophet ﷺ stood on the mountain of Safa, and he told his people, he stood up in front of his people and called all of them. And he said, if I told you that there's an army behind this mountain that is about to come and kill you, would you believe me? They all unanimously said, we've never heard you tell a lie. You are as-sadiq al-amin. You're the most trustworthy, the most truth-telling of all of us. He said, then I am a messenger from God to you. And all of them, in that moment, in unison, they belittled his call. But amongst the first people that accepted his message were the slaves and the most oppressed, the most neglected from society. And Bilal radiallahu anhu was one of the very first, it's a different narrations, but one of the first handful of people to accept Islam as a slave. You know, Bilal, he didn't know the Prophet ﷺ at all. They had never interacted with one another. SubhanAllah. They had no relationship before. But as soon as he heard a message that would transform the way society is, that was a calling for him to accept that mission and purpose, even though he was a slave. Islam didn't come, this might sound tough. Islam came to transform the oppressed to being the most noble. And actually, the ummah and the community of Muslims, they won't truly triumph until they understand the shift. The Prophet ﷺ said the greatest numbers, and this is a warning to me and you. When you live in privilege, you think everything is just good. My car's good, my house is good, the AC is on, the lights are on. Everything is always so good that any negative thing harms you. We're very unresilient. But those that are live and born in oppression and difficulty, and they're impoverished, the Prophet said they're the greatest numbers of people in Jannah. Do you know that? The greatest numbers of the people of paradise are those that grew up in oppression, subjugation, what we would say, the lowest class of society. They're the greatest numbers of paradise. That is more fearful for me and you, not living in bliss and not realizing like, oh, our account, our hisab with Allah is so much greater than people that we think today. Oh, the people of Africa, the people of Asia, the subcontinent, different parts of the world, they don't have water, they don't have food. Man, I feel bad. I know I see the Instagram video. I'll donate $5-10. I'll give a little bit of charity. Somebody stands in the masjid, I'll give them a little bit of money. But I'll kind of feel bad, but here you go, some crumbs to help them out. That's all we do. But subhanAllah, for them, their path to paradise is so much easier than ours. Because Allah will ask us about them. Our hisab and privilege will be about them. So Bilal radiallahu anhu, when he grew up as a slave, he heard this transformative message of Islam and he embraced it right away without even knowing the Prophet ﷺ. When he did radiallahu anhu, amazing transformation happened. It was the first time a slave became the freest man in a town, in a society. It was a transformative experience for the Arabs. And what Bilal did, radiallahu anhu, his master was named Umayyah. And in those first early days, that turning point became such a source of his oppression. Umayyah was a big fat man, unbelievably rich. He is, I don't want to say this, but he is the typical kind of American, if you think about it, right? Always eating, extremely lazy. No offense. I mean, just this is kind of our society. I hope this is not a reflection of who, I'm not describing you. Very privileged, extremely greedy. Umayyah used to pay people for everything. And by the way, one of the things that he used to do, he was known for, whenever he was too big of a man to fight. So he was known to pay people to fight for him on his behalf. He was such a man of greed and arrogance, and he owned Bilal from a young age. And Bilal, Bilal was a beautiful human being. Of course, he was a very dark complexion and skin, particularly to the Arabs. He was a black man. Even though his mom was from Habasha, but his dad was Arab. He was known as a black Arab. So he had very dark complexion, of course. But he was known to be actually a beautiful beautiful physique. He was extremely strong, well-built, tall. He had really deep hazel eyes. He had beautiful curly hair, and he had a very, very light beard that barely connected. Radiallahu anhu. He was a great slave. And Umayyah utilized and oppressed him so badly. Once Umayyah found out that Bilal became Muslim, Umayyah would be non-stop in his torture of Bilal. It was said, and this is the very first days of Islam, as soon as he found out that he accepted the message of Muhammad ﷺ, Umayyah started to abuse Bilal. First, it was with spitting and cursing him and belittling him, chaining him then in the sun, bringing him out into the heat of the sun of the desert, tying him on the ground from his legs and his arms just to bake in the sun. The narrations used to say that Umayyah would drip water, like keep him out there for hours baking in the sun, and his other servants would pour water on the chest of Bilal so he would see the water, but he would be dying of dehydration. For months and months, Bilal was whipped and abused and tortured. Umayyah would take him to Ta'if. And Ta'if, these were the people that stoned the Prophet ﷺ. He would take him chained to Ta'if and give him to the gangsters and the thugs of Ta'if. And he would tell them, do whatever you want with him. And one of the things the companions saw that was done to Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him. For days he would be tied, his arms and legs, and dragged on his back in the streets of Ta'if in Mecca. Until the companions said, we saw the trails of his bloods throughout the streets. And of course, it's hard for me to explain because slavery is not a day. It's not an episode. It's a continuous life. He would be every day. He would be healed up and brought back again to the oppression. His back would be whipped and it would heal and it would be whipped again. He would be dragged, heal up and be dragged again. Umayyah used to have a huge collar on his arms, around his neck and his arms, and he would have just this huge collar walking around with him in the street. He was severely subjugated, like millions of slaves before, like millions of people today. I know again, just bringing the light to where we are today, we sit in comfort while our own brothers and sisters, like Liqa Kurdiya, sits rotting away in jail cells and in ICE detention centers today. Our own brothers and sisters today in the most vile prisons, in the terrorist state today, still in the hundreds and thousands, abused, tortured, beaten, killed, as we sit here today, every second, every minute. It is an endless slavery, oppression. When there is an oppressor, it is an endless feeling of weight of torture. And again, the reminder of the resilience that these people have, both that we see today and throughout history, to not succumb to these oppressors. Bilal never succumbed. As a matter of fact, Bilal is known throughout all of his oppression. What would he say? What is the word that he would repeat over and over? Everybody knows it. It's ahadun ahad, which means one. He would be dragged in the streets, and all he would say, Umayyah would come to him and tell him, just say Al-Lat, just say Al-Uzza, I will stop torturing you. Just give up. Just trying to break his will, trying to snap his soul. And all Bilal could say is, Ahadun Ahad. Of course, they asked Bilal, why you only said, Umar later on would ask him, why you only said Ahadun Ahad? Why is that all that you would say? Well, you know what Bilal would said? Radiallahu anhu. He said, if I knew another name of Allah, I would have said it. People may be watching the Umar Sulaiman series. I know I am. Our family is. The beautiful names of Allah. Ar-Rahman, Al-Jabbar, Al-Qawi, Al-Qadir. There's so many beautiful names of Allah that we should call on in moments of need. The different moments and times to connect with all of them. Bilal didn't know as much. We all in this room know more Quran than Bilal did. He didn't know. He didn't have time. He never went and learned Quran from the Prophet ﷺ. He never sat with the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't know. All he knew was Allah and Ahadun Ahad, one. No idols, just one. And that's all he knew how to say in the moments of his most difficulty. Radiallahu anhu. The turning point came then that Bilal radiallahu anhu, his end would be, Umayyah said, all right, it's time for the end. After months of torture, as we know in the famous story, if you've watched the movie or if you heard the story, Umayyah brings Bilal and he says, I'm going to put the end of Bilal. The end of Bilal is coming. I'm going to kill him. So he pins him in the desert again, arms and legs tied, face up, and 7 to 10 men carry a boulder and put it on Bilal's chest. And the boulder is literally smashing Bilal's existence to an end. The intention was this would be the end of Bilal. And Bilal could have in that moment, his life could have ended. We would have heard about him. He probably would have been a great companion, like those that were killed, like Sumayyah, who was the first martyr in Islam, who was killed in a savage, brutal way. Or many other companions that were tortured and abused. Bilal's story could have ended in that moment with that boulder on his chest. But of course, you heard about the superstar yesterday, the legend, the greatest goat of all time after the prophets, who was Abu Bakr. May Allah be pleased with him. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came in that moment to Umayyah, who was a greedy man. And he tells him, Ya Umayyah, don't kill him, I will buy him. And Umayyah hesitates and hesitates and hesitates to get Bilal to the brink of death. And Abu Bakr insists and insists as the town is watching. And Umayyah finally says, okay, take the boulder off of him. He turns to Bilal, and I'll do this in US currency, like modern day currency. Umayyah says, give me $10,000 for him. Abu Bakr says, deal. Pulls out the $10,000 and gives it to him. Abu Bakr, of course, Bilal is dragged to Abu Bakr. He owns him now in his bloody, bruised, broken body. And Abu Bakr, in front of all the people, proclaims his freedom. Allahu Akbar. Umayyah looks at Abu Bakr and he says, you know, you've had him, fine. I would have gave him to you for $100. You paid me $10,000. Abu Bakr looks at Umayyah and says, I would have paid you $100,000 for him. Takbir. A really important lesson on those that have privilege. The wealth that we know, the wealth that we have, all of the wealth, any wealth that we have, the greatest weapon that we can use for good is to spend that wealth. I know. We live in the society, we live in the Instagram, TikTok, all about me society. The ultimate goal of capitalism is me. When you go to work every day, you are maximizing profit for the boss so he can buy something. Whether it's the yacht or the mansion or a nice house and a nice car. Every single one of us. If you are the boss, your job from your workers is that they maximize profit for you. We live in a world where people just want to buy and own and have and hoard. That is the society, obviously not the spearhead of this country, this civilization, but it's the modern trend all over the world. Everyone cares about maximizing their profit for themselves. Because we need 7 shoes. And I need 19 veil hijabs. And I need an entire room of wardrobes and makeup and shoes. And I need the most expensive car with the sickest lights inside around it. And I need it. I need the watch. I need, because ultimately all of status today is money, power, wealth. Everything is status today. What is any value to humans today outside of money, power, or fame? Is there anything else? It's literally the goal of many of us in here. Trying to get as much money as I can, as much power as I can, and as much fame as I can. For myself. The clickbait on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram is what? Just to make money. The working endless hours is what? Just to make money. Everything is about just hoarding. The greatest power of a believer is their ability to take their money, their power, and their fame and use it for Allah Azza wa Jal. He is the one that gives it, and He is the one that takes it. He is the one that gives the privilege of it, and He is the one that snatches it away. He is the one, on the Day of Judgment, the people that are most scrutinized are those that have money, power, and fame. I'll give you quick hadith on it. The first people to go to the hellfire on the Day of Judgment from the believers. Anybody know who the first 3 people are? The first one was a person with immense money. He will come on the Day of Judgment and Allah will ask him, what did you do with your life? He will say, Ya Allah, I made hoards of money and I gave some of it away for your sake. He will say, Allah will say, because the scrutiny is extremely high the more you have. The accountability is at a different level and standard. Just like billionaires today, their accountants are like me and you. I mean, maybe me. I walk into my accountant, 20 minutes he's done. A billionaire walks into his accountant, it takes them 6 months to a year to figure everything out. Right? The accountability on the Day of Judgment with Allah, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, is the same exact way. The more privilege you have, this man had hoards of money, he spent it for his sake, Allah will tell him, كَذَبْتَ, you are a liar. You hoarded your money and gave some of it away. You gave it away so that the people could say, you gave it away. Drag him and take him to the hellfire, and he will be dragged on his face to the hellfire. First believer. Second believer, fame, will be a scholar that was known for his knowledge and his teaching. Second person to go to hellfire. He will be asked on the Day of Judgment, what did you do with your life? Scrutiny, that is fame. I had trillions of views on YouTube. I had millions of likes. I had millions of downloads. My engagements were insane. He will come, Allah alam, on the Day of Judgment. And Allah will tell him what you did. He will say, Ya Allah, I spread knowledge for your sake. He will say, كَذَبْتَ. The accountability is so much greater. You're a liar. You did it so that the people could say you were a person of knowledge. Drag him on his face and take him to the hellfire. And the third person is a shaheed. Someone that thought that they had power over the other army, right? They were going out to regain power for the believers. I mean, what is the ultimate form of power other than fighting for Islam? He'll be brought on the Day of Judgment and be told, what did you do? He'll be say, Ya Rasul, Ya Allah, I died for your sake. He'll be told you're a liar. You did, the accountability is higher. You did it so that people could say. And yeah, for them, they got that reward. But on the Day of Judgment, because of that accountability, they're dragged to the hellfire. So think about it this way. Privilege is a higher accountability. Abu Bakr showed up in the moment. With all of his wealth and all of his privilege, he saved a man whose adhan is, until today, he is the sunnah of adhan around the globe. He is one of the people of paradise because Abu Bakr showed up in that moment. The responsibility of privilege is for all of us to show up in the moment, to show up when we're needed, to give when Allah Azza wa Jalla needs us to give, from our money, our power, or our fame. And so I think that's an important recalibration. If you're an influencer in here, if you're somebody really wealthy in here, or for those that are in the halls of power today in this city, or across anywhere in the globe, there is a special accountability for these three things because it's a privilege from Allah Azza wa Jalla. And it's a reminder for all of us. Bilal radiallahu anhu, as I'll transition, that moment is a turning point in Islam. He becomes, as we know, one of the greatest, closest companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He is, radiallahu anhu, one of the closest, he is one of the people that is in all of the gatherings with the Prophet ﷺ, constantly learning from him, radiallahu anhu. Of course, Islam, there's many ups and downs and difficulties, but the next turning point will be when they get to Medina. His rise to the most notable fame. And of course, as soon as the Prophet ﷺ got to Medina, there was an important first step in building a civilization, which was, anybody know what was the first thing the Prophet ﷺ did when he got to Medina? The first kind of major strategic decision. Yes. Very good. To build a center. To build the home that would connect people to Allah and the community to Allah. And I want to give us a little anecdote about this. I think centers are so important to our lives. Masjids. They're so critical to our lives. In Ramadan, we pack these places, but truly our life should revolve around the center, the masjid. It is like the lifeline, if you will. You recharge your battery every day and you connect it to your outlet. Your heart and soul need to be reconnected to the masjid as much as possible. It's an important lesson that we don't abandon this place after Ramadan. When the Prophet ﷺ does that, a few days, weeks later, there's no way. Imagine at the time the Prophet ﷺ is praying, but how does everybody know it's time for salah? The 5 prayers are mandated. Dhuhr, Asr, Fajr, Maghrib, Isha. They've been mandatory for a few years. But there's no way to tell the people to come. It's an amazing story. So some companions see, of course, the dream that there is a call for salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. A few companions hear the call. They don't know what it means. They go to the Prophet ﷺ and they say, Ya Rasulullah, coincidentally, we all saw the same dream. And none of the people that saw the dream were mandated to make the call. The Prophet ﷺ said, go teach Bilal. He has the strongest voice and the most beautiful voice. Go teach it to Bilal. So Bilal, for the first time ever, stands on top of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, the first masjid in Islam. And he says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. The man who only knew Ahadun Ahad would be the first human being to stand and say the proclamation of the oneness of Allah and telling the people, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala al-falah. He would be the first person. Radiallahu anhu. When Bilal does that, his name would be etched in Ummah's history forever. His sunnah that he did is repeated around the globe today, from Malaysia to Chile, from Alaska down to Australia. Allahu Akbar is his sunnah. Every single person that recites this proclaim, every single person that responds to that call, whose weight does it go into? It's an unbelievable legacy of a slave. It's a reminder for us, it's another gem of a lesson. What sunnah do we leave behind that makes it a signature for us? I've talked about this in previous Ramadans. No one should leave Ramadan or life without a signature deed that is their legacy. Bilal radiallahu anhu's signature deed that every mu'adhin in all of history until the end of time will be in his weight is the adhan. What signature deed do we have in our life that people will emulate for generations to come? It's actually an opportunity every one of us in here have. And by the way, in the age of technology, in the age of the power of this thing, and the more it's growing, like, we have an immense opportunity to leave a legacy of something, some good, right? A signature deed. What is one deed that is more outside of your bounds than yourself? What is a deed that transcends your existence? Do you have one? Do I have one? Do we have a single deed that can transcend past not just our life? We hope that it to be something that people can emulate in our life. But how about for our generations to come? Every single great prophet thinks about the generations to come. Their children. It could be as simple as your children. What have you taught your children that no one else will teach them? My children are in the back, so I'll tell you a real life example. It's hard to teach children, man. They don't really listen. And the difficulty is that other people are willing to teach them more than you. I say, wait a minute. I know I taught my kids Quran. I sent them to Quran class. But how many ayat of Quran have I taught them? How many parts of Salah have I taught them? How many du'as have I taught them? If I can't transcend, alhamdulillah, I get a privilege to talk to you guys at least once a year. Usually the 25th night, alhamdulillah. But how often do you get to transcend a deed past yourself? In the age of social media and AI, it should be relatively easy. But man, it's difficult to do. Just a generation. Can my kids know something about me when I die? That's something. Can my masjid know something about me? Can my anybody, friends, colleagues? Is there a signature deed? Do I have a signature deed? Is there something I live for and I will die on that is a signature deed? Don't leave Ramadan without praying that Allah gives you a signature deed. Interestingly, Bilal is really known for the adhan, but I want to tell you something really crazy. When the Prophet ﷺ, I said the story that he heard him walking in Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ asked Bilal, what did you do that I heard you walking in Jannah? He is the first mu'adhin of all time, but that wasn't the deed. Does anybody know what the deed was? Raise your hand. That Bilal told the Prophet ﷺ, by the way, it's a reminder for us, that he was such a signature deed of him that it caused him to be in Jannah. It's a very mundane deed. It's barely maybe noticeable. Who knows? I see 2 hands here. Go ahead. Did it? Close. It wasn't the sleep part, but it's wudu is part of it. Every time Bilal would make wudu, he would pray 2 rak'ahs. Every single time, Bilal's signature deed was as mundane. It wasn't the adhan. That wasn't what the hadith said. It was a mundane deed. That's, again, a reminder for us. Not mundane, it's mundane to us. But in the sights of Allah Azza wa Jalla, it was extremely heavy. Every time he would make wudu, he would pray 2 rak'ahs. And because of that, and by the way, imagine, Bilal, by the way, was the person that would wake the Prophet ﷺ up for every salah. And he would go every single salah, the rest of the Prophet's life. Bilal would be the one to say, Ya Rasulullah, it's time for salah. For Fajr, he would knock on his door. For Dhuhr, he would knock on his door. For Asr, he would knock on his door. For Maghrib, for Isha. Every time it was time for salah, Bilal would go to the door of the Prophet and say, Ya Rasulullah, it's time for salah. He was the chief of staff of the Prophet ﷺ. He would be the one to make sure he is on time where he needed to be, conducting the most important deeds of the day by being there at the front of salah. Bilal. But that's not what his signature deed was. It was that every time he made wudu, he prayed 2 rak'ahs. And because of that, when he died, he was guaranteed Jannah in this life because of it. Your signature deed can be something mundane. Purifying your heart every night like another companion. No grudges. Taking care of somebody's debts. Being somebody that is very keen on taking care of children. Taking care of the poor, the oppressed. It could be something as simple as teaching people that don't know much about Islam. It could be as simple as little reminders of du'as that you can teach or say to teach other people. It could be, subhanAllah, sometimes the most mundane things. But they're consistent in their quality. And Bilal teaches us consistency and quality are 2 important elements of a signature deed. Radiallahu anhu. May Allah be pleased with him. Don't leave Ramadan without having a signature deed or praying that Allah Azza wa Jal grants you a signature deed that you can live on and die on. Lesson number 2. Signature deeds are your legacy in this life. Try to find and maintain and be consistent in one of them. And that's a beautiful story of Bilal radiallahu anhu. The third important lesson, the third scene, really quickly, and I'll go through them inshallah ta'ala. The triumph. All of this was the build. What is one of the ultimate triumphs? Oppression will always meet an evil fate. I said on the Day of Judgment, Allah will be darkness. Well, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Inna Allah la yumli lil-zalim. An oppressor Allah will allow him to keep oppressing. And I know I'll go macro, but let's go micro. And subhanAllah, this happened in the life of Bilal and it was talked about upstairs. Bilal was cursed, even after his Islam. He had racist comments made about him. He was explicitly debased. removed of his dignity when he was called Ibn Sauda by one of the companions. You're just a man of a black, son of a black woman. He is, racism, the crime of the tongue that Sheikh Abdul Rahman talked about upstairs, is one of the most severe crimes. And amongst them is debasing somebody because of their natural traits. Imagine how many people around the world are debased because of God's traits for them. Their color of their skin, where they come from, how they live, the shape of their nose, their mouth, their eyes, their head, their ears, how tall, how short, what their disabilities may be or may not be. How many people their value is debased because of Allah's inscription that's how they would live their life. Allah's programmed their DNA in that way. It's one of the greatest forms of oppression. Sheikh Abdul Rahman talked about upstairs. The tongue is the first micro place of oppression. The killing begins when the tongues unify around the debasement of human beings, right? Dehumanized. What we call normalizing dehumanization, right? It's the first step to be able to take somebody's life. At the micro level in our own lives, it's the most dangerous thing. That we say things about other people that remove their dignity. I mean, it's the easiest way, as the Prophet said, a man will be thrown on his face into the hellfire because of a word that he said or she said, and they thought nothing of it. Its weight in your eyes was so small, the weight of it in Allah's eyes was so big. The power, the oppressive nature of the tongue. That's really one of the main places that we will fall short. And we ask Allah to forgive us of the oppression of our tongues. Because again, you're held account of it on the Day of Judgment. That then goes into, of course, I mean, for somebody that just curses people, imagine what happens to them. Imagine the people that bomb children and justify it. It was, they did it to themselves. They make fun of it. Imagine the people that exterminate in the hundreds of thousands people. Imagine what's going on to our ummah today. Like, look at the way we are today being dehumanized around the globe as an ummah. It's an important lesson from Bilal. That call, if you will, a day of triumph, a day of إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُمْلِ لِلظَّالِمِ حَتَّى إِذَا أَخَذَهُ لَمْ يُفْلِتْ. Until their day comes, and when their day comes, it is a swift end to it. I told you that Umayyad wouldn't go to fight, right? He was, because of the other chiefs of Quraysh making fun of him, he was forced to go to the Battle of Badr. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to meet the army of the Prophet ﷺ or meet the Prophet ﷺ in battle. And Umayyah, remember, fat, lazy, greedy. Was he fighting? He didn't fight. In the Battle of Badr, he was one of the people that hid out, kind of like, sidelined. The battle was over, and the Muslims had already won the battle. The battle was pretty much at its end. And then Umayyah saw a friend of his from back in Mecca, Abdurrahman bin Auf, another extreme baller of wealth and power and prestige. Abdurrahman used to be unbelievably wealthy and always giving it for the sake of Allah. Abdurrahman, radiallahu anhu, he had a relationship with Umayyah, right? Business interactions and so on and so forth in the past. So Umayyah sees Abdurrahman and he says, Ya Ibn Abdullah, he didn't call him Rahman. He just said, you slave of Allah, will you take me? Like, can I be your captive? Because if you're a captive of war, you were guaranteed kind of okay, I'm good, I'm going to live. So Abdurrahman, who was, by the way, Umayyah was big, fat, and heavy. Abdurrahman was pretty skinny and short and thin. So he ties Umayyah up and he's bringing Umayyah back to the tents as a prisoner of war. And who sees Umayyah coming back? Bilal radiallahu anhu. And Bilal automatically pulls out his sword and says, leave this enemy of Allah, he's going to die. And Abdurrahman is like, no, don't kill him. He's my capture. He's my prisoner of war. You're not going to kill him. And Bilal swears that either he dies or I die at this moment. And the narration says that Bilal radiallahu anhu essentially threw Abdurrahman out of the way, radiallahu anhu, and killed and stepped on the neck of Umayyah and killed him. May Allah curse him. The slave on top of the master at the end. The oppressed on top of the oppressor at the end. And that is, by the way, the sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jal. That the oppressors, they get to oppress. They get to enjoy stacking up the worst of sins that they will be punished for on the Day of Judgment. You get to build, if you will, dig your grave. Dig your hellfire to the depths of the hellfire. It's the only reason why the oppressors continue to oppress. In our life, they might do it for 100 years. In the hereafter, the 100 years will be as negligible as imaginable. Eventually, the oppressed will be on top of the oppressor, and their end will come. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to allow that day to come in our life, and Allah to rid us of all the oppressors. Bilal at that moment, it was a story of triumph. He was a story of how Islam freed and brought the oppressed to the levels of the height of triumph, if you will. And may Allah be pleased with him. An important lesson here is the patience and the perseverance that's needed to eventually see victory. And I think this is important for us as an ummah today. Again, look around the world. Our brothers and sisters in Iran, in Lebanon, in Palestine, around the ummah. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect all of them. May Allah Azza wa Jal alleviate their suffering and their oppression. May Allah Azza wa Jal end their killing and their children's killing and their fathers and their mothers and their sons and their daughters. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal that we never see the scenes of our ummah carrying their children to graves ever again, even though it's still going on today. The day will come where we will be victorious. But there's a resilience that's needed, right? Last lesson, inshallah. When the early slaves, Khabbab, was going through immense oppression, he came to the Prophet ﷺ one day and he said, Ya Rasulullah, when will this end? Ala tad'u lana. Why don't you ask Allah to just end all this oppression? Why do I have to see the Instagram every day and the Twitter every day? Like, when do I stop seeing these images of death and destruction? When will it end? Ya Rasulullah, id'u lana. Ask Allah to bring it, a victory. I'll ask Allah to end this. And you know the Prophet ﷺ, he was sleeping and he stood up. And he got frustrated at Khabbab, who was the person that asked him. And he said, Ya Khabbab, you don't understand. You're not resilient enough. You're not patient enough. And honestly, this is one of the hadiths that keeps me going, personally. Have we ever watched 5G extermination before for 870 days now in Gaza and still ongoing? Like, how long can the world watch? How long can we see people burying their children in Lebanon? How long can we see children dying in Iran? How long can we see people dying across the ummah? Like, how long? Like, sometimes, like, man, when will it end? And I think this hadith is a great lesson for us. It was said to Khabbab and it was said to Bilal and those that were tortured. He said, the people that came before you, when they were Muslim, they would be sawed in half in public. Literally, the oppressors would get a saw and cut people in half for the public to view. And that wouldn't let them leave their faith. They were resilient in faith. And the people that came before you, he's telling people being tortured, baking in the sun and being boulders on their chest. He's telling them the people that came before you, they had it worse. Their oppressors would remove their skin from their bone as they were alive in torture for them to leave their faith. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I promise you, a day will come that a woman will be able to travel across Arabia from the furthest of the east across to the west and she will not fear Allah. Islam will bring so much justice, so much safety, so much tranquility, so much prosperity, that a woman can travel herself throughout the desert and she will feel nothing except Allah. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ قَوْمٌ تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ. So don't hasten what Allah has written as victory. I think this lesson is extremely important for me and all of us. In the depth of what we perceive and what we see are really dark times. The resilience of faith that's needed. Like we don't, hide when our coworkers are talking about their faiths. That we don't shy away from defending the rights of our brothers and sisters. Like there are little things that we can do in these moments that don't allow us to have resilient faith. It's just to show up. It's all we have to do. It's just to show up and be there. Like the actions, the calls, the moments. It's all we ask to do. And eventually Allah will flip the script, inshallah ta'ala. Eventually oppression comes to an end and the victory comes, but don't be hasten. Don't hasten Allah's victory. Allah has a perfect plan for everything. For those that have died, and we ask Allah to accept them, they are birds in paradise. We will wish that we can be with them when we die. Those that are being carried to their graves today, and we've seen, we will wish that we could be with them when we see their positions, their status. So I think it's an important piece for us to remember. This victory eventually comes. Our job is to do our best. Do what we can. As Bilal's victory eventually came and the Prophet ﷺ taught us. The final thing, inshallah ta'ala, I'll culminate with. Fast forwarding, and Bilal had so many other feats, but really quickly, the Fath of Mecca, the last moments of the MAS signature moment of his life. The Prophet ﷺ goes back to Mecca in victory. The idols are destroyed. Islam is embraced by everybody. And when the Kaaba is purified of the idols, what happens? The Prophet ﷺ, as he walked in, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, with his chest, not like the emperors and the tyrants and the leaders we see today. When he proclaimed a real victory, not the victory every other day on Truth Social that's falsely proclaimed. When he walked into Mecca, no bloodshed, no killing. He, sallallahu his chest was on his horse in so much humility that Allah had finally given him victory. When he walked in and they destroyed the idols, the second signature moment for Bilal, the second key signature moment, he would have the opportunity to be the first human, a black slave that was dragged in the streets of Mecca on his back, would stand above everyone's head on top of the mountain as they're all looking up to him, and he would say, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The very first time adhan would be made in Masjid al-Haram, in the Kaaba, was made by Bilal radiallahu anhu. And he would have that signature moment as the star of that day, that Fath Mecca. Known, his name is inscribed in that moment. The greatest victory with the greatest, again, triumph story. And honestly, and I'll speed through it really quickly because of time, he would have one more signature moment. Radiallahu anhu. And he, of course, the Prophet ﷺ dies. And as soon as the Prophet ﷺ dies a few years later, Bilal never made adhan again in a public setting. He couldn't make adhan after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Every day he would go to the Prophet ﷺ to ask him to make adhan. He never made adhan ever again until about 5 to 7 years later, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Umar radiallahu anhu would be called to the third greatest mosque. Bilal's story links the three greatest mosques with the triumph of the greatest, most well-known slave being the voice that would echo the greatest call in human history, the only one, the first one at all three. Umar radiallahu anhu would open Al-Quds, may Allah Ajal free Al-Quds. Only with the likes of Bilal can Quds be freed, Al-Quds be freed. On the day Al-Quds Day was yesterday. That's why I actually wanted to speak about Bilal. The victory and the freedom of Al-Quds comes when we are the likes of Bilal. When our triumph, our resilience, our deeds, our standards, they can't match him. But we could try to emulate him. He could be a role model for us. The greatest story of any slave ever in human history. He would, for the only moment in his life, make adhan at the opening of Al-Quds when the companions, they hadn't seen Bilal. He had been in battles and he had been parts of many great victories, but he would go and meet Umar and the great companions as they would go to get the keys of Masjid al-Aqsa. It wasn't a masjid at that time, it was just an empty land. But somebody had to make the first call at Masjid al-Aqsa. Somebody had to do it. So Bilal, Allah Ajal bestowed and blessed Bilal to be there and say for the last time, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Bilal would make adhan for the very first time in the three most sacred mosques on earth. A legend of all legends. The legacy of all legacies. The freedom of Al-Quds and Mecca and Medina. The victory comes when we emulate and model and learn the story of Bilal radiallahu anhu. The great leader for all of us. And on his deathbed, and I'll close with this, there was something very important as the final lesson. The lesson of resilience. The lesson of signature deeds. The lesson of standing up against the oppression and persevering through oppression. The lesson of every one of us having a boulder in our own life that we need to overcome, challenges. But the final lesson was his love for the Prophet ﷺ. On his deathbed, his wife, he had no children and he was married to one woman for decades. He had no children. Radiallahu anhu. At his deathbed, his wife was pouring tear. She said, what a calamity, what a calamity. I'm losing my husband. And Bilal turned to her and said, why are you crying, my wife? Why? Why are you saying it's calamity? Ghadan, tomorrow, I will meet Muhammad wa ashabih. I'm going to be back with my beloved. My love, my devotion, my hope, my anticipation, my yearning is to be with the Prophet ﷺ, to be back with him, to be back in his companionship, to be back in his midst. And he knew at his deathbed, I get the moment to see him again. Radiallahu anhu. His love for the Prophet ﷺ is the final lesson. He didn't know the Prophet ﷺ and he accepted his message. At the moment of his death, all he thought about was being back in his midst. Radiallahu anhu. Loving the greatest human ever existence, the man who Allah Ajal wants us to love. The Prophet ﷺ said that لا يؤمن أحدكم. None of you truly believe. This is embodied by Bilal in a way, and it's the last lesson, inshallah. None of you truly believe. حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. You don't truly have faith. The faith the likes of Bilal. Until I, meaning Prophet ﷺ, is more beloved to us than our parents, our wives, our children, وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ. The love that Bilal had to the Prophet ﷺ was unmatched. It was so special. And that's an important recipe and lesson that we can take, inshallah ta'ala. How much do we say sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the Prophet ﷺ? How much do we make salawat, yearn to be in his company, think about him, emulate his lessons, reflect on his life, reflect on the things that he taught us, bring it to our lives. The Prophet ﷺ should be centered to our life, and that love, his true love, is an important lesson that we take from this great companion. I ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to make us of those that are resilient like Bilal. We'll close with a short dua. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to make us of those that believe and have faith in Allah like Bilal. And have the love to the Prophet ﷺ like Bilal. And overcome our oppression like Bilal. And inshallah ta'ala, may Allah accept that we are gathered with him in the highest levels of Jannah. Ameen. Allahumma ameen. I know we've got a few questions. Yeah, I'll take that inshallah ta'ala before we officially close inshallah ta'ala. Yes.
The first one is, that story started with sacrifice, of being ready to put his life on the line for Islam. What ways does sacrifice going to oppression and slavery?
Yeah, I think great question. I mean, we should be, so how do we sacrifice? What do we give to sacrifice? Great question. Um, let's do a show of hands. I mean, I've been talking for about 45 minutes. What ways can we, from this story, what are some lessons of sacrifice that we can practically apply in our lives? I'll do a few hands on each side. Where is the sacrifice here that we can apply? Yes. I appreciate that. How can we sacrifice things that we know? And I've been trying to be very keen on this. Sacrifice things in our life that we know oppress our brothers and sisters today. How can you sacrifice? Honestly, there's a lot of them. But if we know something is directly aiding the killing and torture and oppression of our brothers and sisters, we should sacrifice that. From the coffee that we might need to drink or want to drink, to the makeup that we wear or clothing that we have, to the technology that we leverage and use. It's getting more and more dark, I'll be honest. More and more things are owned by people that want to kill us. We use and send money to people that use and send that money to subjugate and destroy our brothers and sisters. It's a very dangerous cycle. So the mindfulness and the taqwa of that, I think, is a great lesson. What else can we sacrifice? Yes. Absolutely. Sacrifice, again, giving to the causes that are good, that transcend us, that are able to support, again, Abu Bakr's story of like freeing slaves, freeing the oppressed, spreading awareness, sacrificing of our time. If you don't got money, you got time. Give your time to these needy causes. If you don't have time, you have influence. Influence others, explore, bring awareness, share things about what's happening. I think that's all within our means. Sacrifice, one last one from the brothers. What can we sacrifice? Yes. Yes, very good, mashallah. Sacrifice from your time here, from your sleep, from your energy, from your youth. Sacrifice towards the things that are good. Guys, you get old very quickly. And for those that are old in here, they know, including myself. It moves very fast. What are you sacrificing from your youth and your young age and your capabilities today that are really important in serving, again, transcending yourself? Bilal is a great story of transcendence. How can we transcend ourselves? Second question, or last question.
So during the time of Bilal radiallahu anhu, slavery was not considered stopped by Islam. And so if slavery is such a big oppression, why wasn't it one of the first things that was cleared up?
Yeah, great question. Great question. This is a beautiful reflection actually from Dr. Tariq Suwaidan. Everybody that sticks around wants a deeper level of insight, right? Jazakallah khair for sticking around. If you gotta go, you gotta go. That's fine. The Arabs, this is very important. One of the main economic, why would Arabs in the middle of the desert be important to superpowers? There's only two superpowers at the time of Prophet ﷺ, right? The Persians and the Romans. They conquered much of the land. They were imperial in many natures. Did they ever colonize or conquer the Arabs? There's no oil. There's no need to do it. So the Arabs had to create trade routes that would bring the superpowers and wealth to them in the middle of the desert. What did they have? They didn't have anything in the desert. They had no commodity. The greatest commodity was a slave. One of the greatest commodities was a slave trade, where the Arabs would bring people from Eastern Africa through the Arabian Peninsula and sell to the Persians and Romans. And so slavery became a systematic thing amongst the Arabs pre the Prophet ﷺ, and of course slavery, unfortunately, until today. Even those, the Epstein class understands slavery. I mean, not to get down that rabbit hole, but even until today, the Epstein class conducts and facilitates slavery, right? Until today, children are enslaved. Until today, slavery exists. The Arabs systematically leveraged that as a part of their economic wealth and So it was a source of economic power for them. When the Prophet ﷺ came, just like anything else, there is a stage-by-stage phase-out. It was like Allah Azza wa Jalla refined change management for those that are no change management. There was different stages of getting rid of things. Slavery was one of them, including alcohol and other things. Adultery, right, was phased out in stages. So idolatry was phased out in stages. Those stages of slavery happened over time. Eventually, Islam would transform the entire Arabian Peninsula system of economic power outside of slavery until, it became so noble that, of course, one of the greatest, may Allah allow us to be of those that free slaves. One of the greatest deeds that you can perform is freeing of a slave. And Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, who enters Jannah through every gate possible. Because he's a superstar of every great deed. He even was the trendsetter for the Muslims in freeing the slaves. May Allah be pleased with him. So that's the reason why it was phased out slowly. It turned the economic power. Eventually, of course, Islam is, and is still until today, the greatest source of freeing slaves. Last question. Is that about this? Go ahead, quickly. Amazing PhD that somebody can do. Maybe you can, sister. The studying of the phasing out of slavery across civilizations and how Islam, even our own country, you had Jim Crow, we know the stories, right? Almost 400 years of slavery and maybe another 100 to 200 years, even until today, of getting getting slavery out of the system. Islam was transformative in that. It's a great, maybe PhD, if AI allows us to make PhDs anymore. But to do a PhD on that story, that's a great point. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless all of you. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal, may Allah Azza wa Jal make us of those that emulate in the footsteps and follow in the footsteps of Bilal radiallahu anhu. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us of those that triumph over our oppression and our ummah's oppression. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make us individually and collectively as an ummah be of those that are follow the footsteps and the triumph and the legacy of Bilal radiallahu anhu.